What's happening, fam? L.A.R. movement still moving. Book is entitled Lessons from a Non-Custodial Father at Amazon, Kindle, and CreateSpace. Link will be in the description box below as usual. Go get it. PayPal link there also. They asked me to put it up, so I'll put it up. Thanks everybody for supporting. This video is entitled Will Gen X Fail the Millennials? Shout out to Nala Says, Taz, Ren. They were talking earlier this morning. She went live. Go check it out if you didn't watch it. Go subscribe if you're not subscribed. But it was part of the conversation was talking about baby boomers. And I've talked about that in the past where I think baby boomers failed the Generation X. But one of the older people was like, what happens when, we're going to get old too. So, are we going to be considered failures too? And that's, to a degree, that's a fair question because it's the same. It's part of the same cycle is repeating itself. We look at the baby boomers as failures to Gen X because we watched them squander their parents, our grandparents, land, resources, savings, heirlooms, businesses. So we've watched that happen. And now in this time, it's like, okay, there was no part of the reason we watched the community be gentrified because of these things. And this is part of the reason why a lot of us had been in poverty because of squandering, the parents wanting their kids to have a better life than them, but the kids just wind up blowing it. So our parents blew what they got from their parents, basically. But we also have to take Jim Crow into consideration. For like my grandparents, I have to take Jim Crow into consideration and civil rights into consideration for my parents. So they had a whole different mentality because the world was completely different also. Now the reason I say that is to say this. If you're Gen X, I was born at the end of 79, so I'm at the end of the spectrum of Gen X, basically. So the crack era and how that worked out and some of the things that we did as people from Gen X and some of the ideologies that we have clung to, like we cling to these ideologies that are dysfunctional and detrimental. And now the generations subsequently after that are quote unquote ratchet. That's because we were kids and teenagers and young adults at the height of, and we perpetuated that ratchetness and we passed it down. Just like they passed down religion without work, we passed down ratchetry. So would that fail the millennials? And I think so. Like my grandparents used to say, my parents' generation is soft. Thus, that they're probably going to raise us to be soft. And now we're seeing the same thing because some of us in Gen X weren't soft because, for one, like in my life, my grandparents were very much so involved. But at the same time, because my parents' generation squandered their parents' wealth, we didn't have the luxury to be spoiled or pampered. We had to, we dealt with reality very quick. Plus, like I said, crack era also. So it added to it. Now, as we become adults, now we get out of the quote unquote a poor neighborhood, a poverty mindset, less violent atmosphere, and what can I say this? And we get our kids out of those environments, and we don't want them to be in the same situations or the same areas that we were as children, but those areas actually helped us and made us better people. because of the adversities in those areas. So now our kids become soft. Like my grandparents would say that my parents were soft, thus raising soft kids. Now the difference is we've got the lessons of our parents and our grandparents, and we're really in tune with society as far as technologically, because my parents and grandparents had a difficult time, with the VCR and the DVD. So everything that came subsequently after that, it became more and more difficult because the baby boomers and that silent generation, they're really not technologically savvy like that. They don't get down like that. But us as Gen Xers, we are. We're not as into the computers and the internet as, millennials and generation, I guess, Y or Z, whatever, as they are. But we actually get the whole spectrum. So we know better. We know how this ends if you soften up your kids and you don't prepare them for life. We know how that ends, and we just give them stuff. They're gonna squander it. So could we be considered failures of the next generation if we're teaching them, by I'm giving you the life I never had, like your grandparents gave your parents the life they never had. Thus, and part of the integration of civil rights, is something new, because part of the issue is we're looking at the civil rights era in hindsight, and we're seeing the mistakes that were made in the civil rights era that we shouldn't make today. So we're becoming more black first as far as ideology and economically. But at the same time, we've ingratiated ourselves into a multicultural community, or more Caucasian community. So we want to be black first in ideology and black first economically, because you can actually do that through using technology and the internet. But you put your child in a situation where they're surrounded by a bunch of people who aren't black, and their friends aren't black, and those families aren't black, and none of those people are black first. And some of those friends and families have the ideology of racism, and you already know it, but you want them to be around that situation. So now they're hoping for the best in the world, when the best in the world doesn't operate like that. So now, what? To me, you hurt your child. But who am I, right? So now, could that be considered a failure? Right now you see people scrambling to become entrepreneurs. Are they going to say, Gen Xers went to college because we were taught to go to college and get an education? So now we're the same part of the same generation telling people to be entrepreneurs when we were taught the complete opposite. We thought, go to college, get an education, get a good job, in the same framework as our probably parents and grandparents to a degree. But they didn't say go to college and get a good job. They would say, get a good job. Excuse me. Now, the reason I bring that up is because of this. Even though we're telling our children to be entrepreneurs and go or go to school and work in STEM, what we're not doing at the same time is our grandparents normally taught us practical skills that could give us jobs. Paint, fix homes, like lay sheetrock and roof, and sometimes electrical work, cut the lawn, fix cars, be able to fix appliances, to lay foundations or to lay brick. They taught us certain things like that. But does Gen X do we teach our kids those same type of skills? En masse, absolutely not. We've become those grandparents who, I don't want my kid to ever be that, or what we say the boomers were. I don't want to be like my dad doing this, and I don't want to teach my kid to ever be like their granddad who did this, and this for 30, 40 years. But that's where your bread was buttered. That's how you got the lifestyle you got, was from them doing that labor, right? Nobody's cooking has gone down the tubes. Being able to make clothing, stitch, sew, make your own sheets, make your own drapes and carpentry, all that has gone out the window for the most part. So I think in the end, if we don't look at it in totality, we might wind up being looked at the same way that the baby boomers are looked at in the end. So I'm just putting that on the table. I'm done. Like, share, subscribe. Catch y'all on the next one. Peace.